Today is June the 20th. Isn't the church just traditions? Let's find out together as we study Deuteronomy chapters 29 and 30. Today, as we read through the Bible in a year, I'd like you to read Deuteronomy chapters 29 and 30. We are in Moses' third speech to Israel. In this last speech, he's giving the final thoughts before Moses dies, and then Israel enters the promised land. So in chapter 29, he again reviews the covenant, but he does so in a very interesting way. He talks about the covenant and the curses. If you remember last week, we looked at the curses that were pronounced on Mount Ebal, blessings on Mount Gerizim, but he focuses here on the curses. In verse 12, for example, you're standing here today to enter into the covenant of the Lord your God. The Lord is making this covenant, including the curses. He repeats that again in 14, 20, and 21. The covenant with the curses several times here. He comes back to talk about the curses. Now, why would he do that? One of the reasons, I think, is to emphasize what the Lord is actually doing. In the Near East, at this time, it was very common to make a covenant and then call down curses on those who didn't fulfill the covenant. I have here a book called Near Eastern Religious Texts relating to the Old Testament from Mesopotamia, which Israel would have known. Here is a treaty from King Esarhaddon. It starts out the treaty which Esarhaddon, king of Assyria, has made with you before the great gods of heaven and earth, on behalf of the crown prince Ashurbanipal. Now, he goes on, but what I wanted to get at here, he comes around after saying you should obey. He then says, if you don't protect him in country and in city, if you don't fight and even die for him, if you don't always speak the whole truth to him, if you don't always advise him in utter loyalty, if you don't smooth the way for him in every respect, you get the idea. He goes on telling them what they need to do. But he says, if you don't do these things, if you stand here on the ground on which the oath is given and give the oath with words and lips and not your whole heart, and you don't pass on the oath to your sons who lived after this treaty, then you will live in fear forever of your God Ashur and your Lord Ashurbanipal. Curses that are brought on the one who breaks the treaty. So one might think, isn't that what Israel's doing? Aren't they just following the traditions of other nations? In other nations, they would make the oath, but frankly, it would mean very little. It was a reason for the king to come back later and fight against the people with whom he had made the treaty. Isn't following God just a list of traditions? Isn't the church today just a list of traditions? It's like Moses anticipated that questions. And so Moses, in chapter 30, verse 11, says this command that I'm giving you today is not too difficult for you to understand. It's not beyond your reach. You understand what it is that I'm asking you. Then later in verse 15, he says, now listen, today I'm giving you a choice between life and death, between prosperity and disaster. I command you this day to love the Lord your God, to keep his commands, decrees, and regulations by walking in his ways. If you do this, you will live and multiply, and the Lord your God will bless you in the land you're about to enter and occupy. If you do it, God will bless you. Then Moses goes on. But if your heart turns away and you refuse to listen, if you're drawn away to serve and worship other gods, then I warn you now that you will certainly be destroyed. You will not live a long, good life in the land that you're crossing the Jordan to occupy. Today, I've given you the choice between life and death, between blessing and curses. Moses thought that what they were doing was real. He let Israel know that. This is real, folks. I think he'd say the same thing to us today. Now, going to church or more appropriately, the Christian life, following Jesus, is not about traditions. It's not about doing the things that have always been done. It's life and death. Follow him, as Moses says. Love him with all your heart, with all your soul, and he'll bring you blessing. Follow your own way, and he'll bring you curses. Like, follow, and subscribe to this devotional on whatever platform you use to listen to it. Email your questions to us at questions@becomehope.com. Tomorrow, we'll answer the question, isn't church just one option among many?